We all know that real estate has created more millionaires than any other industry on the planet. We also know that it has created a lot of heartache due to mismanagement, overborrowing, and just simple life events that happen to all of us. Welcome to the Cash Flow Pro podcast. My name is Casey Brown, and I am your fearless leader. And although we might be bourbon sipping and at times foul-mouthed Southerners, we will always do our best to be honest, straightforward, and due diligent with all of the information we pass along to you. Welcome to the show. Hey there, and welcome to today's episode of Cash Flow Pro, your daily real estate investing podcast and YouTube channel. I am here today with Darren Smith of Solid Growth Properties, and we're going to take it a little bit different today than we normally do because Darren knows quite a bit about industrial properties, because as most of the listeners know, we tend to shy toward the side of multifamily and some self-storage and some consumer-based, real estate and real estate syndications and capital raising. But this is going to be, we're going to talk a little bit more about industrial today, what folks look for maybe in due diligence for industrial, and maybe you can take something that you learn here and put it into practice in your business. So Darren, how are you today?
I'm doing fantastic, Casey. Thank you for having me on.
Absolutely, man. We're always glad to have guests that bring different angles to the real estate business. And of course, as you and I were talking before the show, we really have done very little, if any, industrial discussion on this podcast, just simply because I feel like the industrial capital raisers and the industrial real estate investors are a little fewer and far between, mostly because it takes almost a whole different set of skills, I guess, if you will. Different things you look for in a market during due diligence obviously are different than what you would look for if we were looking at doing a residential development or a multifamily development. So anyway, so tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got started in real estate, and then we'll kind of lead into the discussion and see where the talk takes us.
That sounds great. I'll keep the history part to a minimum because I know people want to hear just what am I doing in industrial, what's working, what's not in the current state. But
Sure.
My history goes back to did the military service after high school for a little bit, and that was a lot of fun. Took me around, and really glad that I went that route. Got into real estate after almost 6 years in the service, and I did that because I was sitting next to a guy. I was working a computer job at the time, and he owned a couple of rental properties, and that kind of sparked the interest right there. I got every book that I could. I followed that guy around. I picked his brain. We sat next to each other, so I would talk to him all the time. Go to his crappy little rental in downtown Baltimore and just watch what he did and learned it all. So I was handwriting letters. I did it all. And that was through the mid 2000s. And like a lot of people back then, I made some good money in real estate in the mid 2000s. And then I got crushed pretty badly in the crash. I got way overextended. I was investing in mobile home parks out of my state. So I had to fly to get there. I thought I was big stuff and learned that I wasn't, and took away some good lessons. So got out of real estate for a couple of years. Fortunately, my computer job, did really well, and so that was fine. But I just always had the bug, and I never lost it. And it was only on maybe 2-3 years. And in about the 12-13 year, I got back into it. I signed up for some wholesalers lists in my town. I was still doing residential at the time, single family homes, trailers, that kind of thing was what I was interested in. And one of the wholesalers called me back and said, "Hey, what kind of properties you're interested in?" And by the way, if you're a wholesaler, you want to call everybody that signs up for your list. You never know what you're going to learn.
That's right. You never know what you're going to find either.
That's it. You never you're fine. But I became his assistant. And here I was making really good money in computers. And I basically worked for this guy for free for about a year, doing everything I could, answering phones, taking keys, pictures of properties, whatever it was, negotiating with sellers as well, and made almost no money in that, but learned a lot. And then just to cut today. Yeah, please go ahead, Casey.
Before we get too far separated from the discussion of I want to go back, and I know if you're like me, we've all been there where we're down, we're out, we're knocked on our feet, or we're knocked off our feet, where we thought we were big. You made the statement, I thought I was big stuff, learned I wasn't. I have much the same type of story, as do I assume many people out there, and I don't want to at all act like, hey, if you've never been broke, you're going to go broke before you ever make it, because that's not necessarily the case. But I I want to go back to that because what do you feel? Do you feel like overextension or over leverage was really like the key mitigating factor to that, to what happened there? Or was there other, like, for instance, my mitigating factor was a divorce. Okay. It was pure, plain and simple, a divorce that just got ugly over over kids and some other stuff. And I think everybody has their mitigating factor, but without getting too far into maybe your personal business, I just would like, because I feel like if people know potentially what to look for, that maybe there's a chance if we can help one person avoid something like that, that's the case. But what do you feel like was the main thing there?
Excellent question. And trust me, I've spent a lot of time thinking about that because, it was painful to go
Oh,
through.
I have too, mine as well. I just you start questioning because you're like, man, if I would have just stepped a little to the left, I might have
Mhm.
been able, if I could have just made it another 2 weeks, or whatever, So I know, man, it's not anything to be ashamed of necessarily. It's like you said, they're lessons.
They are lessons. And I took a couple away from that I still use today, actually. The the biggest one for me is as investors, as anything you do in life, you play this balancing act of stretching beyond your comfort zone, trying new things, taking risks, but not getting too far out over your skis to where you end up, in a snowball. And I absolutely went ass over Tim Cup, I guess is the way you want to put it, because I went outside of my area. And so my
Yeah.
geography was one. I went outside of an asset class that I was experienced with, and I went big when I did it. And thinking, oh, big numbers. People probably use the 1% rule, 2% rule, whatever they use. This was like the 3% rule. And when you see these numbers, you think, oh my gosh, this is amazing. And it really sucked me in, the allure of that. And so the main lesson I would give people is you want to push, you want to try things, you want to put yourself out there, but do it in a way that also can minimize your risk and also the risks of, if you're borrowing capital, the risks of the capital of the people that you're using. So couple of ways that I do that are, in the primary way, is geography, location. I have owned businesses in several different states doing flipping and wholesaling, but I always had a presence there. I always knew the area really well, had people on the ground that I knew really well. And now all I do is commercial. We can get into that story, but I'm no longer in the residential side of real estate. I only do industrial. And everything that I do, I can get there within 2 hours. I want to drive. I want to sit
Okay.
down. I just met with someone this morning. I was on the phone with them yesterday, set the appointment, and I'm there shaking his hand at 8 o'clock in the morning. And I need to be able to
Sure.
do that. And so when you're investing in something, when you limit yourself to the geography, you can learn it really well. You can make the relationships, the connections, the repair people, and just know stuff that you're never going to get when you are flying to a different city or driving way out of your way to do that. So that's what I do right now, even with industrial. That was if I had done that locally and I could have gone and put my hands around some people's necks in 2 hours versus having to catch a plane ride, I could have headed off a lot of the problems that I ran into.
Sure. And then it's tough to, and that's what I think a lot of people, they see some of these bigger guys zipping across the country, and while when you mimic yourself
Mhm.
and you become reckless to try to mimic somebody that may seem reckless, but really things are very calculated and very poignant and right direct, but you don't see that when people are sharing Instagram posts. In fact, I'm not saying that's what you went off of was Instagram or Facebook. I'm just saying that so many times people see, like social media becomes your highlight reel, really,
Mhm.
if you will. And I think a lot of people see that and they think, well, man, that guy can own 250 units in Austin. I can own them too. And
Mhm.
and while that's great and wonderful, the thing is that not all residential real estate is created equal by any far stretch. And I don't think I'm telling any. Everybody's like, well, duh, you don't need to tell me that. Well, there's some people out there that do need to be told that. That when you really need to know these areas that you're investing in, and that you're looking at, because again, it's just not all created equal. And I think there's some of that going on right now. And particularly I know of a few deals that man, it's just like all it's going to take is for that lily pad to shift one little bit to the right or the left, and then all of a sudden everything's off balance and it's gone. So that's really respectable that you were able to kind of put your finger on exactly what it was, what it is. And then, as we're always so familiar with, it's not necessarily how you got down in the dumps, but it's what makes you is how you built back out of what you had and in the situation you were given. So much respect for that, for sure. Because like I said, we've all been there. Well, I say we've all been there, at least I have, and obviously you have, and some other folks that we know in the business have as well. So all right, so going forward, I think I kind of cut you off a little bit there. You were getting into potentially how you had worked for the guy for a year, at basically for free or minimal cost or whatever, to learn. And in some senses, if you're like myself, we jump in, we start learning things. Before I know it, I've accumulated the equivalent of an associate's degree in how to work my printer or something. It's like you dive in and you get things done and you go until you learn it all, and then you move forward. So I guess let's kind of pick up there, and let's talk about how specifically you got into the industrial space.
Yeah, that's. I'll segue into that by going back to a comment you made earlier on how different the residential and multifamily is from industrial. And in some ways, it absolutely is, but in other ways, it's not in the skill sets that it takes. You have to learn a whole new language, kind of, so to speak, just getting into commercial. It absolutely, there's a lot of new terms that you need. Industrial, especially, all sorts of things you look for in properties and locations that make a big difference. But for me, coming from the residential side, having bought or wholesaled hundreds of homes through that business, the skill sets that I had for the processes, for the marketing, for the sales conversations, how to talk to a seller, that was stuff where, working for free for a year, like you said, I learned an associate's in that, and I got it for free because I didn't have to go pay for it. I got to work for this guy for free and go do all those things, and then I built that through my business. I've been in several masterminds, high level ones that have helped me grit through those, and I took those skill sets. And when I was looking at the commercial world, and I got into commercial because I had some friends that were doing it, or maybe I listened to a podcast like you people and just heard a little bit about it. It piqued my interest. And how I dipped my toe in was I took the same skills that I was using in my residential side, and I started applying them to the commercial, only at a higher level. So the same CRMs. In fact, I use really simple stuff now. I've used all the big fancy whiz bangs and Salesforces. I use Google Sheets now, but that's another conversation. But
Sure.
for my marketing right now, 90% of the properties that I buy and conversations I have are from very nice, those auto pen mailers with handwritten, and then a business card in with my pictures. My, the tracking and the follow-up systems of everything is follow-up, everything is relationships. So I have sales for customer, for building owners. I have that CRM, and I track that with follow-up dates and calls and letters and things like that. But I also do it for my relationships. I have what I call a relationship management system. So all the brokers, all the contractors, a friend of mine, she rents dumpsters to commercial properties, and what a great person to talk to know who's moving in, who's moving out, and those
Sure.
just fostering that.
There you go. There's your nugget for the day right there. There it is. Everybody wants to know, well, how do you find this, that, or the other? There you go. That's it. That's the answer. Look at the dumpster people. They know.
They know. You nailed it, Casey. So build those out. And so anybody who's doing residential right now, even if they only buy a couple houses a year, something like that, how are you finding those houses? You're finding them through relationships. You're talking with people. You're sitting down face to face with someone across a kitchen table. If you can do that, just get out and start talking with people. Take the same things, apply them to the commercial world, talk with brokers. One of my best brokers I work with even to this day, it's just because I went and toured a 200,000 square foot office building. Why did I do that? I had no business being in that building, but I met him, and through that conversation, I've learned a lot of other things. And he actually, I wholesale commercial as well on the industrial side, and he's wholesaled a building for me last year that I cleared over $250,000 on that one, just because I started that relationship and I started talking with people that it was no risk. What was the risk? Being embarrassed, getting in front of them, not knowing what I'm doing. I was used to that from the residential side. You've had doors slammed.
Sure.
So
Sure.
your listeners already have that skill set.
Well, and so many people spend so much time chasing the little money that the big money is being made by other people. I mean, it's unfathomable to me that people could ever, and a lot of times people want direct, immediate, what am I trying to say? They want direct, immediate validation, whether that be in the form of somebody paying them for their time or somebody paying them to drive an hour away to go meet with somebody, when in fact that meeting could lead you to any number of different things. And so and that's part of what we do in the business. And I had somebody tell me that one time on the real estate sales side, we were talking about, oh, I don't know how much money somebody made doing whatever. And she said, in real estate, when I look at the amount of hours, on the sales side, when I look at the amount of hours that I actually every week spend doing this job, she's like, I make like what, $800 an hour or something. It was some stupid figure. And obviously there's a lot of other little things that fed into that, going to lunches and going to dinners and, the things that surrounded it that maybe weren't being figured into the direct hourly time that it took to do that business. And so it's just, but there again, man, I mean, look at that. I mean, you hit a home run on something that you just were, I'm assuming was probably unexpected, but it came from a relationship that you had nurtured and walked down the road to do it. So, so you told me before the show that you're in Pennsylvania. What does that 2 hour window kind of look like, and what types of industrial, stuff is going on there right now?
Pennsylvania in 2021, there's a corridor along 78 and 81 interstates that had the second most million square foot leases of anywhere in the country, but LA last year. And so industrial around here is absolutely exploding. We're within, I don't know the numbers, but we're really close to a huge percentage of the population in the country, and also to a lot of ports along New York. So I love the industrial space around here. Now, that said, I'm not doing million square foot leases. I am a very little fish in this sea. I've only been on the commercial side for 4 years. And so I'm still learning. I'm still, I consider myself pretty new at this game, but really enjoying it a lot. So what I focus on is I will talk to those people. I had a conversation with someone last week that had a million square foot building, but I'm not the buyer for them. I know a lot of people that are. So I focus on anything that's 10,000 square foot and up. And I really like the 20,000 to 100,000 square foot range. Those are, and I'll tell you why I like those properties is they're not being built. There is a ton of building going on right now, millions and millions of square feet within 20 miles of my house being built right now. The smallest building is 300,000 square feet and up. And the only exceptions to that are people who are owner operators or who have owned the buildings or owned the land for a long time. Prices are so expensive, and the economies of scale don't make to build something that's 50,000 square feet. So I'm closing on a 55,000 square foot building at the end of the month. And I couldn't be happier with it because nobody's building that. I know that even in a downturn, those are the types of buildings, if you can subdivide it out and get it even to smaller spaces, that are always going to be in demand. Whereas if I owned a 30-year-old 1970 built 300,000 square foot warehouse that's a couple miles off the highway, I'd be a little nervous right now because there's so much new product coming on that, yes, you're in super demand right now, but what happens in that recession? What happens in another 08, 09 scenario? And it's not a matter of if, but when. And it's not going to look like the last time. I have a lot of people say, what's going to happen in this market? I pat myself back. I called the last one, a couple years out. I saw that coming. I still got hurt, but I saw that coming. I don't see what's happening right now. I don't have that. My crystal ball is a whole lot fuzzier because so many things have happened with between COVID, between all this artificial stimulus coming in, which is now causing, inflation. And how does the economy work in an inflationary market? I know people that did deals back in the 70s. I talked to them. They're like, we got loans at 15, 18%, and it still worked. But what does that look like? Obviously, cap rates for your listeners are the percent return that someone's looking for on their investment. So if it's an 8 cap, they're looking for an 8% return on the NOI of what they're making on that property. if you, as your cap rate, as your interest rates go up, your cap rates also go up, which means your prices go down. But that can be a great time to buy as well. So if everybody's scared, oh my gosh, the sky is falling and the market's going to crash, well, make sure you have some reserves in place. But this could be an opportunity to buy some things that are still solid properties, solid tenants at a high cap rate, so that when things do return back to normal, that you'll still be good. And I would say, for somebody saying, I'm going to sit on the side right now, I'm going to put everything in cash and not do anything. Well, here would be my advice. First off, still stay out there, still be talking with sellers, still build up your CRM with your people you're talking to, so you're in communication when that time comes. Learn everything you can. But number two, as long as you have some solid tenants in place with a solid location is critical, I think, in industrial, being close to highways and on and off access, but also long-term debt on the property. I had the opportunity in this building I'm closing into the month to get a great rate for a 5-year fixed or a decent rate at 10 years. And I absolutely went with the 10-year. I don't know what's going to happen in 5 years, but I know that whatever happens, I'll be able to ride that out. And as long as your property cash flows for that period, you'll be okay. So those are a couple of things I'm doing to protect myself for whatever happens here that I'm not sure what that's going to look like.
All right. So a couple of different things that I am trying to pick through here. So the first thing, let's talk a little bit about the 55,000 square foot building that you said you're closed on the end of the month. If you don't mind, I mean, can we go into without? I don't obviously want you to be like it's at 123 Main Street, because you don't want somebody to. By the time this airs, it'll be closed. But what was the capital raise? Did you do a capital raise on that? And what was the purchase price? What was the amount of the raise? And how did, because I think that the biggest, at least for myself, and again, I'm not an industrial guy. So bear in mind that whatever questions I ask are probably likely questions you get from beginner investors in industrial as it is. But my first objection or reserve to even considering industrial is, it seems to me that, so, all right, we had here locally, Ebonite used to build bowling balls here in our town. We were the main, I don't even know, we were the main place where they built them or whatever. And they had probably a building much the same size that you had, 55,000, just 50,000 square foot building. I guess I'm assuming, again, I'm very much so a beginner at this in the industrial side. And so the thing that I witnessed when Ebonite was bought by somebody, another company, and they were like, all right, we're closing the Hopkinsville plant down. When they left, basically, there was a building there. It had a roof. It had, it was a ton of square footage. It didn't have high enough rafters for them to stack however many pallets a lot of the factories use or want to be able to stack on top of one another. Now the roof lines weren't high enough. Mm-hmm. And so while that's just one little nuance of that particular deal, industrial to me just seems like those properties become so ingratiated in ingrained, I don't even know if ingratiated was the right word, but ingrained in the day-to-day operation of that specific product, that now if that tenant says, hey man, we're out, peace, we'll send you your last 6 months rent. Well, then there you go. You've got a building that was specifically had everything done for that particular company or whatever. And now you're like, okay, now we got to try to re-rent it.
Hi, this is Casey Brown, host of the Cash Flow Pro podcast and YouTube channel. Have you been thinking about investing in real estate but just don't know where to begin? I'd like to help by inviting you to check out our website at www.3000capital.com. There you will find an array of material that will help you learn all about real estate syndication. And while you're there, be sure to check out our free video series download titled 5 Must-Know Keys to Success in Passive Real Estate Investing. I'd also like to personally thank you for making Cash Flow Pro part of your day. Now, back to the show.
And it just, I guess, to me, all of that has to come in underwriting. Like, that's the logical thought process that, hey, we need to underwrite for, say, 2 years vacancy or whatever afterwards because we don't know what's going to take place. But
how does that work? I mean, just tell me a little bit, dive into that a little bit.
It's a great question, and it's probably one of the biggest barriers for people considering industrial or even office and retail in some cases. If you have one or just a couple of tenants who are taking up the majority of your space, and so a couple of ways that I try and mitigate risk on things. So the first one is when I'm looking at the building, the absolute most important thing for me is the location. If I'm in a good spot, if I can get to this building easily, if I can get a tractor trailer that backs in off of the road and can be completely off the road in, those are important. Does it have enough parking? So the structure itself needs to be one that is valuable and would be sought after, even if this tenant leaves. The other thing I do look at for the building is how adaptable is this to multiple tenants potentially. So I bought a building in January. It's 48,000 square feet, and there's one tenant in there. So if that tenant moves out, can I take that building and split it up into a couple of them, a couple smaller spaces, so that I can at least rent out part of it, at least cover my expenses at that time? And the answer on that one is absolutely yes. In fact, it was at one time 4 different tenants in that building. So that's another way that people can mitigate their risk on something like that. The other way to mitigate that, for what I do, is if I'm getting tenants in there, and this matters for the tenant, and this also matters for my financing, is I want something long-term enough and secured enough by the tenant that I know I can get to a point so where, okay, if that happens, I have paid down the debt enough, I have built up enough reserve, it's cash flow enough at that time, and be conservative with what you're putting aside, and the building that I'll be okay. So when their lease expires, fine, that's great. If it's empty for a year, it's empty for two, not that big a deal. And I say that when the lease expires, but everybody's sitting there thinking, oh my gosh, what if they leave early or they're bought out? So if you have a low credit worthy tenant, you absolutely have to factor that in. If it's a mom and pop or somebody who's newer, or maybe their finances aren't as good, or if they have some clauses in the lease that allow them to get out very easily without any repercussions, that's a big risk factor. And you need to either account for that with a much higher cap rate, or you need to say, hey, look, if they move out, one of the important things I look at is what is their rent that they're paying compared to the market rent for that building. So in industrial, we go by the price per square foot. So let's give a range of $2 to $8 per square foot. It's in some areas it's much higher. When you're in cities, it can be even more. So we'll say if it's $6 a square foot is what they're paying right now. If you have a 50,000 square foot building, that's $300,000 per year is the rent. And we'll just assume that's triple net rent. Triple net means they're paying for all the taxes, insurance, utilities, and a lot of the maintenance on those things. We can get into triple nets and grosses and things if you want as well. But
sure.
You have that $300,000 a year that's coming in. Well, if the market rate for that building is $5 a square foot, well, now I'm going to be a little bit scared, because if they move out, I'm not going to be able to get another tenant in there at the same price that they were paying. I'm going to have to discount my rent that I'm charging. But if market rents for that building are $7 a square foot or $7.50 and they're paying $6, I know that, hey, great, if I take this thing to the market and I bring it out at $6, or maybe I have to drop it down to $5.50, well, I'm way under what the market's bearing. And you still have to account for some leeway in there, but I know I'm going to get it rented for a lot faster than another building that is at market at the $7 or $7.50. So those are a couple of things I do to mitigate risk, and then making sure that it's long term enough. The debt that you have, make sure that's secured for something that gets you through whatever rough times may come.
Sure. Yeah. That's just, again, I couldn't imagine that wasn't one of your biggest objections to saying, hey, let's go on board. So real quick, as we're getting close to our time here, about how much capital did you raise for this last deal, and how did that go? And was it a 506B or C? And what was that like?
Capital raising, to be perfectly honest, Casey, you're going to be, some of your other guests, I'm sure, are going to give a lot better advice on this. I've, for years, been a guy where I buy it with my own money. And I played that game where I would make money and then I'd go buy a building, and I'm very happy with my portfolio and the cash flow from that. But then I'd be broke. I wouldn't have cash. And I got tired of doing that. Sure. And so I have just only in the last year switched over to bringing on some small partners for a couple of buildings. Okay. And so you asked about this building specifically. It's the first time where I've tried to raise over a 7-figure number for purchasing a building. And I was able to, I thought I had it lined up. This was a little bit of a roller coaster for me going through this process. I had it lined up with a couple different people, and we were good to go. But it was one where the cap rate on this with the bank rates, it's a little bit of a thinner deal. It's an excellent property from location, tenant, the condition of the building is, almost everything's brand new. So from a long-term hold perspective, this is a class A for me. It's not a class A building, but it's right up there with what I want. But it was a little bit thinner. And so the raise was a little bit tougher. And I had a situation where I was getting close to the end here. And one of the people that I was going to invest with me, they own some other properties in their other portfolio. And they said, hey, look, I don't know what's happening. I'm not cash flowing these other properties. I really want to keep something on the reserve. And they backed out. And honestly, I encouraged them to do that because once they talked about their situation, I said, you absolutely need to back out of this because you're not someone that I want 2 years from now saying, oh crap, I need money back.
Yeah, I need out. I need some cash. I need this, or hey, I'm going broke. My trustee's going to be in touch with you.
That's it. So you got to vet your investors as well. And I'm learning that. So I have several dozen people, and I build that list out as well. By the way, my CRM, I have a separate one for that. That I'm always talking with people and trying to raise.
So you've got 3 CRMs. You've got broker relationship, just relationship CRM, yep. Seller, and then potential investors.
That's correct. That's good.
That's great, man.
Yep. Sellers, everybody I work with. And then I use 3D platforms. And by the way, I probably overcomplicate this a little bit. I try and get as few systems as possible. For my sellers, I use Google Sheet, and I just put a follow-up date column, and I sort by that. And I make sure I follow up with them, whenever that's due. For my investors.
Man, everybody gets so tied in, and I'm guilty of it as well. I get the latest and greatest. Oh man, this does this and this does that. And at the end of the day, nothing substitutes the grit for just, no matter what system you got to pick the damn phone up and call. And that's there. There's everybody wants to emulate whatever, but then they don't want to actually make the phone calls that it takes to do it. And so, anyway,
I want to touch on that case real quick, just because you fished it. That is probably one of the biggest things when I'm talking to new people is they want all the features and all the auto thing in that. Commercial, if I had to say one thing, it is personal. It is how can you make something as high touch and personal as possible? You're not dealing with we have lists of hundreds of thousands of people on the residential side. My list right now, I think, is about 12,000 properties total. And so I don't need to automate. I don't need some system that sends these texts and stuff. People hate that crap. You want to really get to know these people. And I could probably name dozens of people that I'm calling on a regular basis with their properties. And so that's why Google Sheet works for me. I've had Salesforce. I mean, I spent over $10,000 setting up a Salesforce thing before. I could use that. I don't, because I want it simple. I want it touch. And how can I get to know these people well? So for all you people out there, don't spend all this time and effort on the back end stuff. Here's one number. Here's your takeaway. We talked about going and talk to various people. How many sellers are you talking with every single week? That's your only metric you need to be tracking right now. All the other stuff, how many hours in your CRM, who cares?
Yeah. And it's the same as when I started my podcast. They always said episode 1 is better than episode none. And when you look at it like that, I don't want to advocate that you need to call one seller a week by any means, but make the first phone call. And once you make the first phone call, then concentrate on making 10 phone calls. And then once you make the 10 phone calls, the next week concentrate on making 50 phone calls, whatever it is. Just start somewhere. Start and get comfortable and figure out what questions people are asking so that then you can come up with their objections and a list of how you need to do it. So, all right, as we're getting close to the end of our time here, we have a couple of questions that we ask every guest that comes on the show, and there's no right or wrong answer. Just answer them however you feel necessary, and then we will get to your contact information, and we will call it a day. So the first question is, what is the best book that you have recently read or are currently reading?
Best book recently read. I read so many that it almost gets to be a muddle after. I'll just say that one of the most impactful in my mind for how I've changed my life and my business trajectory in the last year, and that was Vivid Vision. That's one where sitting down and don't just read it and kind of think about it a little bit. Like I truly was the guy that I sat for hours at a time, brain dumping, everything I want, and then putting that into a true vision and doing that for my commercial business, doing that for my residential business, doing that for other things in my life. And it's made a huge impact. And I still, to this day, I wrote that out and I read it at least every single week. and I do a vivid vision for my day, just taking 5 minutes to mentally walk through that day. And that's had a big impact. I love it.
That's great, man. And that's something, and that's what I always try to tell folks to focus on. People that come to me for education, or like education, like I'm going to teach somebody something, but I mean, when people that call and say, hey, can you tell me how we do this or how we do that? And it's repetitive, instantaneous. You have to set that first goal right here, the next goal way out there, and the next goal way out there. And when you recycle that or rehash that every day and have a vision, you just tend to get there. So that's great. That's awesome. Next question. What is a dream vacation that you have either taken or hope to take?
Oh gosh, my couple of really good ones. I'd have to say my best vacation was wife and I went and visited my parents. They were living in Egypt at the time, and we did a Nile cruise. And so highly recommend the history of that. The people are unbelievably amazing. So nice. It was very high class, and just loved everything about it.
That's awesome, man. Yeah. Egypt is definitely on my bucket list. There's so much there. We went to Rome, and I thought, man, the history was going to walk my shoes right off of my feet, because I just, the walking was enormous. But if you could take a Nile cruise and see some of that stuff, and man, I bet that was awesome. So, all right. Well, Darren, listen, if the listeners heard something that resonated with them today, or maybe they want to reach out and get in touch with you, or have some questions maybe about an industrial deal they're looking at, how can they reach out and talk to you, or just get in touch?
I'd love for anybody to reach out if they need any help, looking for a partner, just how to get started. My email is Darren, DARREN, at solidgrowthproperties.com.
Awesome. Well, Darren, thank you so much for your time this morning. We really do appreciate it. And listeners, if you enjoyed what you heard today, please, please, please head over and leave us a 5-star review and tell us what you think about the episode. And Darren, again, from our listeners and from myself, I want to thank you so much for being with us today. Again, industrial is not something that we touch on real often. So hopefully the listeners heard something, and maybe that's the direction they want to go, and they can reach out and get some advice or talk or invest or whatever. So anyway, hope everybody has a wonderful rest of the day. And Darren, thanks again.
Cashflow Pro is hosted by Casey Brown, founder and CEO of 3000 Capital, a commercial real estate investment firm committed to providing its investors with ongoing cash flow and helping them build long-term wealth. If you enjoyed today's podcast, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you'll be notified about all our future episodes. You can find more information about us and our investment philosophy by clicking the link in the show notes below. Thanks for listening.